Welcome to episode 3. So, the first little short that you saw there is a surfer waxing the surfboard. How I'm going to tie this to therapy is this. One of the things that we do as therapists in the therapy room is try to provide a safe space for people to work through their big emotions, which is why the next thing that you're seeing is a professional surfer dropping in on a wave. That's a pretty big wave. But if you think about it, therapy's a lot like this, and so are emotions. And the difficulty with riding the wave of certain emotions comes from the fact that sometimes we're just not equipped, we don't know how, and maybe it just feels overwhelming. So an acceptance commitment theory proposal is that what we do is we sit and observe. We feel what we feel, notice where we feel it in our body, and then we let it happen. Now let me go back to the guy waxing the surfboard. I mentioned in a safe space. Sometimes if we're sitting with somebody else, it doesn't feel quite as overwhelming, and we get the opportunity to kind of talk about what is that feeling and help to label it, identify it, maybe kind of wrestle it and take command of it. Because a good surfer pops up on the board after they've timed themselves with the wave. And that's kind of what doing therapy is like when it comes to dealing with big emotions. There's a crescendo that happens where everything is mounting. Things feel overwhelming. We've uncovered something that is deeply painful, and we need the ability to be able to reflect with that emotion. And I understand all of the feelings that go with that. And if you recall, I told you before, we have supposedly 9 core emotions, but we have 10,000 attendant adjectives to describe how we feel. Because what we've learned is that we pay attention to the negative aspects of emotion, and we don't really focus a whole lot on when things are really good. Well, popping up on a surfboard is a little bit like the risk that we take when we sit with emotions, because sometimes the emotion, we're not in the right spot on the board, we're not in the right spot in the wave, we get knocked off, and then we kind of get pulled under. And if you recall my video about whitewater rafting with emotions, because sometimes the emotion, we're not in the right spot on the board, we're not in the right spot in the wave, we get knocked off, and then we kind of get pulled under. And if you recall my video about whitewater rafting, you want to talk about getting sucked under. This is a place where it can happen, and you can get mashed into rocks. So it feels even more painful if we do it wrong and we crash, or we, as surfers call it, wipe out. The same thing is true, though, in the reverse. If we're sitting with somebody and we're having that sense of safety as we're exploring those deeper, bigger emotions, and we're just dealing with a little bit at a time, it's a lot like riding that wave a few seconds at a time, taking it second by second, reading the wave, adjusting our balance, feeling where we're at in the wave, and trusting that the board is going to keep us on top of the wave, and trusting ourselves enough, and maybe whoever's with us, because you'll notice there's a jet skier out there to rescue. Think of the therapist as the person on the jet ski. My job is to spot, my job is to help you and to facilitate you if you get into too much trouble. Now here's the other part of this that I'm going to caution you to do when you go in to do therapy. Therapy only works as well as the person that puts the time and the effort into the therapy. Now as a therapist, I can give you all kinds of tools, strategies to meet whatever the issue is. But only you know intuitively, like a good surfer does, what works for you, what doesn't, and what feels like it's going to be the right fit for you. It's like picking out the right surfboard if you've been surfing for any length of time. Knowing that maybe today, based on the waves, what I need is I need a 6-foot surfboard, a shorty, 3 fins, or maybe I need to go old school, a 10 or a 15-foot surfboard that's a woody, something that's got 1 fin, because I'm just going to be dragging and lagging on one big wave. But also I want you to think about the wave itself. If we use that as a metaphor for emotion, waves are like this, and so are emotions. They come in kind of a predictable pattern, and sometimes something affects that pattern. Often it's the way that we approach the wave and whether or not we respect the emotion and the wave, as well as our ability to manage what we're dealing with. So put another way, think about the wave and the emotion as being synonymous in your mind, and bear with me, I'm going to paint a word picture here. We've paddled out. We haven't seen any sharks, so we're safe. But we can see that there's a good swell starting. We time it. We start to paddle to catch the wave. And the reason that we're paddling to catch the wave is because we want to be in the right spot before we try to pop up and ride the wave. In therapy, when we are sorting through the trauma, when we're sorting through the things that cause us anxiety, the things that cause us fear and sadness, we also have to be mindful of, is this the right emotion for me to process? And sometimes, it's a question of backing off of the wave and going, you know what, that's going to be overwhelming if I open that door to that emotion, and then stepping back. And you recall I said it's important to be involved in your own therapy, because the more honest you are with yourself and the more honest you are with your therapist, and don't be afraid to push back on your therapist. Don't be afraid to say, you know what, I think we're going too far too fast, or I think I'm overwhelmed. Please, please, please talk with your therapist. Don't be intimidated by the therapist. The therapist is not the expert on you. You're the expert on you. You're the surfer who's got to decide, is this the right spot in the ocean for me to be putting my board in and trying to surf these waves? Because when you do this well, you get that same exhilaration and that same relief, that same feeling of, oh, that was good, when you walk out of the therapy room. And if you're not getting that, start asking yourself, am I progressing? Am I engaging in dialogue? Because you know what? Your therapist is there to treat you with respect, and their job is to be there to facilitate. You can say whatever you need to say to the therapist, and this is why I said push back. Don't be afraid to say, you know what? I don't think that was the right fit for me. Because your therapist needs to know that. And a quality therapist isn't going to take that personally and think, well, they don't respect my authority. They don't respect my skills. No. It's not about my authority or my skills in the therapy room when I'm with you. Because my job is really there to be like the guy on the jet ski. My job is to spot, look for patterns, look for ways that you can tweak your surf, not cut you down, not make you feel inferior, and certainly not to tell you how to surf. That is not my job. That's your job. But it is also your job to communicate with me in the therapy room and say, you know what, I think this really works for me. How do I do more of this? How do I practice this outside of the therapy room? Because it's like anything. If you're putting in the time and the energy, and I'm going to go back to surfing for a minute here, the more that you practice popping up on the board while you're on the sand before you actually get into the water, the more successful you're going to be, because your mind is getting adapted to, this is what we do. It's uncomfortable at the start, but as we get better at it, the more comfortable we feel with it, and the more able we are to put it into play when things really matter. And now I'm going to use just a brief law enforcement example. When I was a police officer, it took about 5 years for me to not feel like a fraud in my job. Because the thing is, every day I was encountering something I'd never seen before, didn't understand, or I was coming across issues where I just wasn't doing it quite the way that either a supervisor wanted, the complainant wanted, the courts wanted. In fact, we had an attorney who had a wall of shame for reports. You could walk into his office and he would not put your name up there, but you could look at it and you would know that was not a good case. In fact, it was, on the one hand, a really important thing that he was doing. On the other hand, it felt shameful because you're looking at that and you're thinking, why am I so crap at this? Well, I'm crap at this because I don't know how to do this well yet. But the more that I practiced, the better I got at listening, the better I got at troubleshooting and seeing the patterns and the problems that complainants had. It also gave me an opportunity to spend time with myself and say, all right, what kind of a cop do I want in my neighborhood? Am I showing up that way? Same thing is true of being a therapist. When I'm listening to somebody and I'm taking in what you're telling me, even if it doesn't look like I'm paying attention, a lot of the time what I'm doing is trying to draw connections and looking for those patterns. It isn't that I'm not paying attention. I really am. I'm also, though, trying to understand things from your perspective. So when I pop off with a question that you weren't expecting, like, that's weird, I wonder where that comes from. What I'm really saying is I'm not quite understanding what you're experiencing. And then I usually do in session follow up with, help me understand where you learned that, or how did that become a practice, or what does that do for you? Because every emotion serves a purpose. It has a function. Every behavior has a function. And if you've seen my Severed Conscience contribution, which was a documentary I participated in January, I talk about dopamine, but I also talk about the way that the mind works. And what we know from over 100 years of clinical psychology is that some things work better because of people's experience, their understanding of themselves, their framing of the understanding, but also because we've learned that people are unique. And just because two people have similar experiences doesn't necessarily mean that what worked for one will work for the other, which is why it should be an ongoing dialogue between the therapist and the client. That's you. So let me go back to my surfing metaphor. Riding the big wave. You may have noticed too that when you're feeling anxious and you're noticing that your breathing has gotten shallow, maybe it's now up into your chest. You may notice that your hands and feet start to get a little bit cold. Maybe your hands are starting to get clammy. And you may notice that your thoughts seem to be going 1,000,000 miles an hour. That rush, that anxiousness can be interpreted as good or bad. Now think about a person who loves to get on roller coasters. What is the thrill? The mind doesn't understand the difference between positive and negative until we keep filtering it through a lens of negativity, in which case then it says avoid that at all costs. And I'll use my own as a for instance. My friends took me to Cedar Point. There's a big amusement park in Cedar Point in Ohio. And at the time, my best friend looked at me as I was getting ready to get on a corkscrew. And probably a good thing that I didn't get on the corkscrew, didn't know that I had a leaky heart valve, and that I could have had some problems. Didn't know I had a heart condition. But the interesting thing was, the more that I thought about what it was going to be like to get on that ride, my face got pale because all the blood is going to the internal organs as a means of safety. It's trying to protect me, to keep me safe. All of my adrenal systems were activated. That's its job, which is brilliant. Thank goodness that it does this. Now, the second thing is, the closer that I got to getting on the ride, the more I felt like I was going to throw up. Also a survival mechanism. Wasn't pretty, didn't enjoy it. It's a thing. But the good news is that I began to recognize something because I was breathing up into my chest. And then once I realized I was breathing up into my chest and that I was talking myself into a deeper fear and a deeper sensation of risk, what I was able to do, shake my head, and then I started to breathe slowly in through my nose, out through my mouth, until I got my shoulders down from around my ears. The blood started to return to my hands, and I just stepped out of line. I said, you know what, I can't do this. Now, how did I overcome this? Exposure. Let me go back to the wave analogy. Because I had gotten to the top of the wave, I finished the wave by dropping in on the wave with breathing, regaining control of my body, and then by looking around. Because I'm moving my head, what I'm also doing is I'm opening up my brain's ability to process. And this is something that when I was a police officer, I learned to do when I got really afraid of something, because our body goes into fight, flight, freeze, fawn mode. So what I had to learn to overcome was that peak and to drop in on the wave, so to speak, and adjust as I was riding down by breathing, shaking my head to clear my mind and bring myself back. It's a grounding technique. In that grounding technique and that slow breathing in through my nose, I'm also talking to myself. And the way that I'm talking to myself in that situation is I'm telling myself, you're not even on the ride. What are you doing? You get worked up over nothing. You haven't even had this experience. You have just painted yourself into a corner thinking that somehow this is going to suck. Guess what? It didn't suck. What sucked was my friends got to go on the ride. They had a great time, came back, found me, and were frustrated that they didn't get to enjoy that experience with me. I'm not upset. They weren't upset that I didn't go. In fact, my friend said, it's probably a good thing you didn't. I wouldn't want you blowing chunks all over everybody on the ride. But that's what it's like when you ride the wave of that emotion. You manage that emotion because the emotion was fear. That was my underlying gripping fear. It was this sense that somehow, in some way, my body and every part of me was at risk. But it took a while for me to figure out what was really going on there, because a few years later, I was living in San Diego working at SeaWorld, and the first day we got an opportunity to ride roller coasters. I went on a roller coaster similar to the ride in Cedar Point. And I not only rode it, I enjoyed it because of that exposure. Now, yeah, my leaky heart, yeah, the doctor told me don't do that anymore. I rode that ride 3 times that day. And you might be thinking, well, that was stupid, Kelly. Yes, it was. That was a decision that I made in order to expose myself to the thing that I was afraid of, to conquer it. I don't recommend doing that for every fear that you have. So please understand. Again, this video isn't therapy for you. This is partly for entertainment purposes and mostly for educational purposes. So understand, though, that when we are about to pop up on the surfboard, there's going to be a moment where we're going to feel like that part of the roller coaster, when you go down too quickly and your stomach feels like you left it up in your throat, and then it finally catches up. That woo feeling. That's what I experienced on that roller coaster. Sometimes you get that when you're popping down onto the wave, because what you're really doing is you are dropping maybe a couple of inches, maybe a couple of feet to get into the wave properly, to get the propulsion of the wave to continue to drive you through the wave and that experience. The same thing is true when we're dealing with really significant emotion. And if we're doing it correctly, you shouldn't feel that whoosh. But what you should feel is supported. You should feel encouraged. But more importantly, what you should have is a sense of understanding and control. Feeling like you control your emotions, your feelings, your thinking, and your ability to navigate those difficult emotions. Now, here's the part of this that I've never heard anybody else talk about, either on social media or even at some of the conferences. I've never heard anybody talk about what happens after. How do we follow up? And I think this is important, because what we need to know is how important was it and how effective was it for the person to accept that level of excitement in the body and then overcome it. Because if you stop and think about it, most people, when they have a panic attack, try to stop it or they try to avoid it. They will do whatever they can to avoid riding the top part of that wave to get down to the sweet spot where it feels good and they start to actually enjoy the ride. So this is something that you need to think about. What is that experience? And if you're not getting that experience, again, that's something that you need to bring to the therapist, because maybe the way that we're trying to help you isn't working for you. But again, without that feedback, without some pushback, we just don't know, because I can't read your mind. Probably don't want me to read your mind. And just as a side note, we're not trying to analyze you. That's not our job. What we're looking for is those patterns and means to be able to help you to better navigate what you're experiencing. So in closing with this video, let me just recap. We need to prep the board, and that means letting you know what the technique is that we're going to do. Second thing is we need to have conversations with you about how to stand up on the surfboard, which means starting on the shore, starting in the sand. And, we're going to do it a few times. You didn't learn math one time in the 5th grade and then went on to understand Euclidean math, as a 30-something. It doesn't work that way. To really get good at processing emotion, to really get good at being able to navigate difficult emotions, especially the big emotions, is a lot like riding a wave. It takes a lot of practice, because the more that you do it, the more confidence you'll gain in it, and the better able you'll be able to do it when you're under stress, which is when it really counts the most. Second thing is, just like every good surfer, you're not just practicing popping up on the board. The other thing that you need to understand is sometimes you do fall off. You wipe out, because sometimes we're picking the wrong emotion. But before we get too far into the water where we could drown, this is why it's important that the therapist is paying attention to what you're experiencing and working with you through that, but also having a plan to manage that. Second thing is, I'm going to go back and talk about the guy on the jet ski. I'm the guy on the jet ski. My job is to haul you out there. My job is to monitor you, look for areas that are potentially dangerous, and then come get you and be there as support for you. Not my job to do it for you, which is why it is so important that you talk to your therapist about what you feel, what your experience is, what's working, what's not working. And don't be afraid, because your therapist really is not there to judge you. Not my job to tell you that you're doing it right or that you're doing it wrong. Because the thing is, there are probably as many different ways to surf as there are surfers, because everybody learns little tools, tips, and tricks to help them stay on the board, navigate the board, and they figure out what works for them. So what I might walk out on a day and need an 8-foot surfboard. Somebody else might be out there on a 6-foot. Somebody else might be out there on a 10-foot. Either way, it is individual. And that's what therapy is. Good therapy delivered correctly means you feel safe. And when you walk out, you should feel better than when you walked in, or at least have skills and tools that you can go home and work on that either incrementally or sometimes by leaps and bounds makes you feel better. If you have questions, comments, leave them in the link below. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is Kelly, the Kilted Therapist. Have a great day.